The first key did not fit. I tried the brass one, then the silver one, though I had used the brass key on that front door for 31 years. Rain slid off the porch roof and down the back of my collar. My grocery bag sagged against my knee, a carton of eggs pressing through the paper. There was a new deadbolt above the old lock. Then I saw the notice taped inside the storm door. Property transfer recorded. Occupancy permission revoked. Contact Cole Residential Assets, LLC ***. The signature at the bottom belonged to my son-in-law. Preston pulled into my driveway before I finished reading it. My daughter sat beside him, both hands folded in her lap. A county sheriff's deputy arrived a minute later, not to evict me, as Preston clearly hoped I would assume, but to keep the peace while he explained that county records now showed my house belonged to his company. 2 weeks earlier, I had signed a limited power of attorney at my kitchen table so Preston could correct a storm damage permit while I took my grandson to Atlanta for surgery. It did not authorize him to sell my home. It did not authorize him to give it to himself. And the house, I would soon learn, was not what he really wanted. There was something else. 11 acres of longleaf pine Walter had left in my name, and Preston had a deadline I did not yet know about. What he did not know was that the woman he had locked out had spent half her life reading documents men hoped she would sign without understanding. I set the groceries down before the eggs broke. "Open my door," I said. Preston stepped out beneath a black umbrella. At 42, he still had the clean, expensive look of a man posing for the portrait he expected his life to become. His navy coat was buttoned over a white shirt. Rain shone on his loafers. "Nell, let's not make this harder than it has to be." Marissa stayed in the car. That hurt more than the lock. Deputy Ruiz, a square-built woman with wet shoulders and a patient face, asked to see my driver's license. Then she asked Preston for his papers. He produced a recorded quitclaim deed and a printout from the county's online property index. The grantor line read Eleanor V. Hargrove, by attorney-in-fact Preston Cole. The grantee was Cole Residential Assets, LLC. The consideration was $10. My signature appeared on an attached affidavit. It was a good copy. Good enough to survive a clerk looking at it for 40 seconds. But the notary acknowledgement was dated March 18. On March 18, I had been sitting beside Toby's hospital bed at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta while a surgeon repaired a valve in his heart. Preston knew that. He had hugged me in the waiting room. That was the first thing that did not fit. "This is fraudulent," I told the deputy. "The deed is recorded," Preston said quickly. "We can sort out any misunderstanding through counsel." Deputy Ruiz looked at him. "Recorded doesn't mean valid, sir." It was the first kindness I received that day. She could not decide title on a porch. She could not order him to remove the lock. But she told him that if my belongings were inside, he could not dispose of them, and she documented my claim that the transfer was unauthorized. She also suggested, in a voice meant for me and not for him, that I call a lawyer immediately. Preston offered to let me pack a suitcase. "It isn't your permission to give," I said. At last Marissa got out of the car. She looked exhausted. Her hair was tied back badly, the way she wore it during Toby's week in the hospital, and she had bitten one thumbnail to the quick. "Mom, please," she said. "Come stay with us tonight. Preston says this is temporary. It's to protect the house until we figure out what's going on with you." "What is going on with me?" Her eyes moved to the deputy, embarrassed by the audience. "Not here. Your husband changed my lock." "Because you signed," she stopped. Preston watched her. "Because I signed what?" I asked. Marissa folded her arms against the rain. "The papers you signed before Atlanta." There had been 4 papers that Tuesday afternoon. A limited power of attorney for one municipal permit. A contractor authorization. A copy of my driver's license. And a sworn owner statement that Preston said the county required because the roof repair estimate exceeded $25,000. Only 3 had come back from the copy machine in his briefcase. That was the second thing that did not fit. I looked through the storm door toward my hallway. The narrow table beneath Walter's photograph stood bare. I always kept a blue ceramic bowl there for keys and loose change. The bowl was gone. So was the framed photograph. Who has been inside? I asked. Preston's jaw tightened. We secured the property. Who has been inside my house? Marissa said, I have. The rain seemed to quiet around us. She told me they had packed my medications, some clothes, and my important files so nothing would be lost. She said it as if she were describing an act of care. Perhaps she believed she was. Which files? Insurance. Taxes. Walter's old papers. Where are they? At our house. Preston stepped between us with the umbrella. This is exactly why we need a calm conversation. You've had a difficult year. You forgot the stove twice. You called me 3 times about the same tax bill. You gave a roofer permission to start work and then denied it. Marissa and I are worried. The deputy was listening. That, I understood, was the point. I had not forgotten the stove. The front left burner had a failing igniter, which Preston knew because he had offered to replace it. I had called him once about the tax bill. And the roofer had begun demolition 2 weeks before the date in his contract. 3 ordinary events, bent until they pointed in the same direction. Deputy Ruiz, I said, would you note that Mr. Cole has removed my personal records and is refusing me entry to my residence? Preston gave a small laugh. No one is refusing, then open the door. He did not. Deputy Ruiz wrote it down. I spent that night at the Magnolia Court Motor Lodge, 6 miles from the house my husband and I had paid off in 2001. I did not go home with Marissa. I could not sleep beneath Preston's roof while my papers sat somewhere inside it. The room smelled of bleach and old air conditioning. At 9:10, I placed every document I had carried out of Atlanta on the bedspread: Toby's discharge instructions, pharmacy receipts, parking stubs, cafeteria charges, and a photograph a nurse had taken of the 3 of us on March 18. Toby looked pale but pleased with the red balloon tied to his bed. Preston stood behind him, one hand on my shoulder. The timestamp was 2:14 p.m. The notary claimed I had appeared before her in Chatham County at 1:40. I photographed everything and emailed the images to an account Preston did not know existed. Then I called Samuel Okafor. Samuel had been Walter's friend before he became our lawyer, which meant he knew when to offer comfort and when comfort would only slow me down. Are you safe? He asked. Yes. Do you have medication? Yes. Do you want me to come? Not yet. I need the recorded deed, the transfer tax declaration, every supporting page, and the electronic filing history. I also need the full packet Preston brought me on March 7th. There was a pause. What did you sign? A specific power of attorney authorizing him to deal with the County Building Department and Gulf Atlantic Insurance regarding permit number R44719. It expired April 1st. Did it contain a real property power? It expressly excluded sale, conveyance, mortgage, gifts, beneficiary changes, and access to safe deposit boxes. You're sure? I wrote the exclusions. That was the first piece of me Preston had never met. Samuel exhaled. I'll have Priya pull the county images as soon as the clerk's office opens. Priya Nanduri handled title and land use work in Samuel's office. She was 37, fast without being careless, and unimpressed by men who mistook confidence for accuracy. Walter used to say she could smell a bad easement through a concrete wall. "Don't call Marissa," Samuel said. I stared at the photograph from the hospital. "She thinks I gave him the house." "Then someone has been preparing her to think that. She's my daughter. Which is why anything you say tonight will reach him before morning." I knew he was right. Knowing did not make the silence feel less like betrayal. At 7 the next morning, Toby called. "Grandma, where are you?" Children know when adults have agreed on a lie. They may not know the lie itself, but they hear the unnatural smoothness around it. "I'm at a hotel while some paperwork gets straightened out. Dad said your house needs special insurance now." I sat up. "What kind of special insurance?" "I don't know." He was mad because I used his printer. There were maps all over the floor. "Maps of what?" "Your woods, I think. The place with the trees Grandpa liked." I kept my voice even. "Why do you think that?" "Because of the green line." "What green line?" "The one Grandpa drew. On your old map. Dad said it ruined everything." Footsteps sounded near him. "Toby?" Marissa called in the background. He lowered his voice. "I have to go." "You haven't done anything wrong," I told him. "Don't look for papers. Don't listen at doors. Let the adults handle the adult problem." "Are you sick?" The question landed harder than I expected. "No, sweetheart." Dad said, "I know what your dad said. I am not sick. You do not have to choose whom to believe today. Go eat breakfast." After he hung up, I wrote 2 words on the motel pad. Green line. At 9:15, Priya sent the county file. The recorded deed was not executed under the limited power I had signed. Attached to it was a different instrument, 9 pages long, broad and durable, supposedly signed by me the same afternoon. It gave Preston authority over every piece of real estate I owned and allowed transfers to entities in which he held an interest if he believed them beneficial to me. My initials appeared at the bottom of each page. On page 7, one initial tilted left. Mine always tilted right. More important, the document identified me as Eleanor May Hargrove. My middle name is Voss. May was my mother's. Preston had copied it from her obituary. He had not copied the power of attorney. He had built a new one around a signature page removed from the storm repair packet, then used the genuine signature as an anchor for the fraud. The notary was an employee of Cole and Ashford named Denise Pritchard. The deed itself had been recorded at 4:52 on a Friday afternoon. 16 minutes later, someone downloaded a certified image. At 5:13, Cole Residential Assets had applied for a lender's title commitment covering my house and additional collateral to be scheduled by amendment. Priya called before I reached the end. "Nell, the house isn't the transaction," she said. "It's evidence that the transaction works." That's my read. They tested whether the forged authority would pass the clerk and title intake. It did. Find the amendment. It may not be public yet. Then find the survey order, environmental request, zoning inquiry, utility letter, anything that comes before money. Which parcel? I looked at the 2 words on the motel pad. The 11 acres on Old Mill Road. By noon, Marissa was knocking on my motel door. She took one look at the room, the clothes folded on a vinyl chair, the legal pad on the bed, the coffee maker I had unplugged because it smelled hot, and began to cry. "Come home with me." "Who's home?" "Mine." "Mom, don't do that." I asked a question. She wiped her cheek angrily. "Preston shouldn't have changed the locks without telling you." I said that. But you signed control over to him, and now you're acting like none of it happened. I wanted to show her the wrong middle name. I wanted to give her the hospital photograph and watch certainty return to her face. I wanted my daughter back quickly, even if quickly cost us everything else. Instead, I asked, "Did you see me sign a general power of attorney?" "I saw you sign papers." "That isn't what I asked." She looked toward the parking lot. Preston's car was not there, but she looked anyway. He said he explained it. "Did you read it?" "No." "Did you see me sign a deed?" "No, but you forget what you agreed to lately." There it was, not in Preston's voice, but hers. I sat very still. Marissa pressed both hands over her face. "I'm sorry." That sounded horrible. It sounded practiced. Because we've been dealing with this for months. The calls. The stove. You missing Toby's school meeting. The meeting was moved from Thursday to Tuesday. You sent the change to an email address I stopped using after your father died. Preston said he called you. He did not. So everyone is lying except you? No. One person is lying. Everyone else is arranging themselves around him. She stood and paced to the window. He is trying to keep our family from falling apart. By taking my house? By putting things where they can be managed. The company has had a difficult year. Toby's surgery cost more than insurance covered. Preston has people depending on him. You sit on land you don't use, in a house that's too much for you, with accounts you won't even discuss, and then you make him feel like a thief for trying to plan. I heard the sentence beneath the sentence. He told you the land could save Cole and Ashford. Her face changed. Only for a second. But it was enough. What did you sign, Marissa? I asked. Nothing. She said it too fast. I waited. It was just a family consent, she said. Confirming that if you needed help, Preston could handle the property without a fight later. It doesn't do anything by itself. Did it say I was impaired? It said we had concerns. Did it identify the 11 acres? She picked up her purse. Mom, stop treating me like I'm being cross-examined. I'm trying to learn how much of my life my daughter has already promised to her husband. Her mouth opened. Then closed. At the door she turned back, tears bright in her eyes. If you love Toby, stop fighting us long enough to let Preston fix this. The door shut softly behind her. I sat on the edge of the bed until the air conditioner clicked off and the room became completely quiet. Then my phone rang. It was Priya. We found the deadline, she said. And Nell, it isn't months away. Cole and Ashford owed Rivergate Bank $46 million across 3 projects. Most of that debt was secured by developments, equipment, receivables, and guarantees from the Cole family. But an $8.3 million bridge tranche tied to a failed retail project had to be paid down or replaced by March 31st. 9 days away. Preston had proposed substituting new collateral, a house on Larkspur Lane, plus 11 acres on Old Mill Road represented as family-controlled development land. The bank's internal valuation assumed the land could support 112 townhomes. That was why Walter's Green Line ruined everything. It marked a conservation covenant we had drafted 22 years earlier but never recorded. And if Preston found the original before I did, he could destroy the one document capable of cutting his projected value almost in half. The covenant had been Walter's idea. Not because he disliked money. Walter respected money the way a mechanic respects fire, useful, dangerous, and never improved by pretending it was something else. By 2002, subdivisions had begun pushing west from Savannah. Developers called every stand of trees inventory. Walter walked the old mill parcel one Sunday morning, came home with pine resin on his palms, and said he wanted the center 6 acres left undisturbed. We hired a surveyor. Samuel drafted the restriction. Then Walter's mother became ill, a factory acquisition consumed 6 months, and the signed original went into a file instead of the courthouse. I had told myself for 22 years that I would record it next week. Now the file was missing from my house. That failure belonged to me. The forgery did not. By 3 that afternoon, Samuel had filed an affidavit disputing the deed and an emergency action seeking to freeze any further transfer. Priya notified the title insurer and Rivergate's collateral counsel that the purported power of attorney was contested. None of those steps gave me my key back immediately. They did something more important: they made it nearly impossible for a careful lender to pretend it had not been warned. My own job was to find the covenant. I kept copies badly in those days, some at home, some in Walter's old machine shop office, some in a bank box in Birmingham we had opened during an acquisition and never closed. Preston knew about the home files. He did not know about Birmingham. I called the bank and confirmed the box still existed. Access required me in person. Then I called a woman named Celia Brandt. Celia was Chief Operating Officer of Hargrove Meridian Holdings. To the public, Hargrove Meridian was a private regional company that owned warehouses, service yards, and pieces of industrial land no one noticed until they needed them. Walter's name remained on the building. Mine did not. I had preferred it that way. After Walter died, I stepped away from daily operations but kept a board seat under Eleanor Voss and chaired the committee that reviewed acquisitions above $10 million. Celia had worked for us for 18 years. She knew that the Buick and the brick house were not disguises. They were simply the parts of my life I liked best. I need the company plane tomorrow morning, I told her. Birmingham? She asked. I had forgotten how little explanation competent people require. Yes. Samuel called. Rivergate has approached us about participating in a distressed credit package. Cole and Ashford? Among others. We declined last month. Reopen the file. No commitment, no contact with the bank, and no one uses my family connection as leverage. I want to know what the underlying properties are worth if the Cole name disappears tomorrow. Understood. Celia, Preston believes the old mill parcel is available as collateral. She was silent for a beat. Is it? No, that was all I said. Hiding the company had once felt like modesty. Later it became habit. After Walter died, it became a wall. Marissa knew her father had done well in industrial real estate. She knew there were trusts and that I would never be poor. But she did not know I had led acquisitions, negotiated loan workouts, or retained voting control after Walter's death. I had let her believe the company was a monument administered by other people. Partly, I wanted her free of it. Partly, I feared that if she knew the full number, every kindness around me would acquire a second meaning. Preston had filled the silence with numbers of his own. That night, someone tried to enter my motel room. The handle moved once, stopped, then moved slowly again. I stood behind the door with my phone in one hand and the room's metal ice bucket in the other. Mrs. Hargrove, a man called. Hotel maintenance. I didn't request maintenance. Water leaked downstairs. I called the front desk. There was no leak and no maintenance employee on the second floor. By the time Deputy Ruiz arrived, the hallway was empty. The exterior camera showed a man in a baseball cap approaching my door, but not his face. A dark pickup had waited beside the ice machine with its plates obscured by mud. Preston drove a dark pickup to construction sites. So did several thousand other men in Georgia. I did not accuse him. I changed hotels, gave the front desk a different surname, and sent Samuel the video. At 6 the next morning, before Celia's driver arrived, I received a photograph from an unknown number. It showed the inside of my bedroom. My dresser drawers had been emptied onto the floor. Walter's shirts, 9 years after his death, I had still kept 4, lay beneath a boot print. The message underneath contained 7 words. Sign the land deed and go home. For the first time since the lock refused my key, I was afraid. Not of losing the parcel. Of what fear might persuade my daughter to help him do next. The flight to Birmingham took 48 minutes. I spent most of it looking down at a quilt of wet fields and thinking about the photograph of my bedroom. Whoever had taken it wanted me to imagine hands going through my private things. The humiliation was deliberate. So was the choice of Walter's shirts. Fear makes you want to move quickly. Experience teaches you to ask who benefits from the direction in which you run. I did not sign anything. At the bank, an officer led me through 2 locked doors to a room with a green felt table. The safe deposit box was longer than I remembered and heavier. Inside were old stock certificates, 2 letters Walter had written before bypass surgery, the original conservation covenant, and a narrow envelope marked in his handwriting. Old mail, if we ever change our minds. Inside the envelope was not another legal document. It was a Polaroid of Marissa at 9 years old, standing between 2 longleaf pines with her front teeth missing. On the back Walter had written, "Leave her somewhere she can still recognize." I had to sit down. Walter had not meant the land as an inheritance instruction. He wrote sentences that way, half serious and half in love with the sound of them. But grief preserves casual words until they become commandments. I had spent 9 years guarding the parcel partly because it was easier than deciding what life should look like without him. I photographed the covenant, then asked the bank to make 2 certified copies. The original went directly to Priya by bonded courier for recording. 1 copy went into Celia's custody. I carried the other. Before leaving, I opened Walter's letters. Neither contained a secret strategy. He complained about hospital coffee, reminded me to renew the tractor insurance, and told me not to turn the company into a shrine if he died before I did. I laughed in the vault room, then cried so suddenly I frightened the bank officer outside. On the flight home, Celia handed me a credit memorandum on Cole and Ashford. The company was not worthless. That mattered. It owned 2 well-located industrial sites, a profitable property management arm, and a half-finished medical office project with strong tenants. Under different leadership and with patient financing, most of it could survive. But Preston had used short-term bridge loans to cover cost overruns, then used new deposits to plug old holes. His father had taught him that a developer's reputation was a form of currency. Preston had kept spending it after the balance reached 0. He and Marissa had personally guaranteed nearly $3 million. Their house was pledged. So were Preston's shares in the company. If Rivergate accelerated, they could lose almost everything. Would Old Mill save them? I asked. Not permanently, Celia said. It might by 6 months. If the zoning and density assumptions held. They don't. Then it buys weeks. Does he know? He has to. His own feasibility report shows wetland limits. The version sent to Rivergate omits them. I closed the memorandum. For the first time, I understood Preston's reasoning well enough to see how he slept at night. He did not wake one morning and decide to steal from an old woman. He began by telling himself the land was wasted. Then that I would eventually leave it to Marissa. Then that using it early changed only timing, not ownership. Once the company was stable, he could reverse the transfers, restore the house, apologize for the paperwork, and show us all that he had saved the family. Every crime he committed was, in his mind, a bridge to the good man he intended to become again. The trouble was that the bridge kept requiring another crime. When we landed, Samuel called. A judge had entered a temporary order barring further conveyance of Larkspur Lane and requiring Preston's company to preserve my belongings. A hearing on possession would be held Monday. The covenant was recorded at 217, Priya added. Old Mill is now restricted regardless of what happens to the deed. That should have felt like victory. Instead, my phone displayed a voicemail from Marissa. Mom, Preston says you reported him for breaking into your hotel. He was home with me. I don't know why you're doing this. Toby heard us arguing and his heart rate went up. If you keep frightening him, I'm not going to let you see him until this is over. I replayed it once. Then I saved it with the others. At Samuel's office, Priya spread the forged documents across a conference table. She had found the mechanism. The limited power of attorney I signed had been scanned at Cole and Ashford at 3:08 that afternoon. At 3:26, an administrative user opened a template for a durable financial power. At 3:41, the new document was exported to PDF. My genuine signature page was inserted afterward. Denise Pritchard notarized it using an electronic stamp registered to her, though the journal entry had been added 3 days later. Can we prove Preston did it? Samuel asked. Not yet, Priya said. The admin login is shared. Of course it is. But the metadata identifies the workstation in the executive conference room. I studied the owner affidavit from the roofing packet. This page is missing. From what? The copy Preston returned. It had my signature and 2 witnesses. The text began higher on the page than the other forms. Priya aligned the affidavit with the signature page attached to the forged power. The margins matched. They removed the top half, she said. Then printed the broad POA above the signatures. Which means someone retained the original paper. Unless they destroyed it. Preston doesn't destroy leverage. He files it. I knew where. Cole and Ashford occupied a converted cotton warehouse near the river. Preston's father had kept original loan papers in a fireproof file room even after the company digitized everything. Walter teased him for trusting steel more than servers. Preston inherited the habit. The missing owner affidavit would be in that room, perhaps with draft deeds, Marissa's family consent, and the report sent to Rivergate. Samuel shook his head before I spoke. You are not going into that building. I still own a small non-voting interest in one of their joint ventures. I have inspection rights. You have a lawyer who can request records. And give them 3 days to disappear. Priya tapped the temporary order. The court ordered preservation. If they destroy anything now, then we can punish them for destroying evidence we no longer have. Samuel took off his glasses. Nell, being right does not make every risk wise. He sounded like Walter. I hated him briefly for it. We compromised. Priya sent a formal preservation demand naming the paper affidavit, the POA template, the notary journal, the old mill reports, and all file room access logs. Samuel arranged for a forensic examiner to image what Cole and Ashford produced. I agreed not to set foot in the building. At 5:30, Denise Pritchard called me from a grocery store parking lot. Her voice shook so badly that I could hear her keys rattling. Mr. Cole said the document had already been signed. He said you were in Atlanta and needed it filed before the insurance deadline. You notarized that I appeared before you. I know. Why? He said it was a correction. He said his father did them that way all the time. Then today Mr. Ashford told everybody not to delete anything, and Preston asked me to replace my journal. Did you? No, do you still have the message where he asked? Yes. Send it to Priya. Do not send me anything else. Get your own lawyer before you speak to the police or the bank. She began crying. Am I going to jail? I cannot answer that. I have 2 girls. Then stop helping Preston decide which risks you take for him. She sent the message. It read, clean up the journal tonight. Make Nell's date consistent with the package. We are protecting her from a mess she doesn't understand. **** The sentence would matter later. In that moment, what mattered was the timestamp, 11:07 that morning, after Preston learned I had challenged the deed. He was still moving. So was I. On Saturday, I met Marissa at a playground beside Toby's cardiologist's office. She would not let me see him, but she agreed to 10 minutes in public. She looked as if she had not slept. I probably looked the same. Did Preston try to have Denise change her notary journal? I asked. Who is Denise? The woman who claims she watched me sign a document while you, Preston, and I were in Atlanta. I placed the hospital photograph on the bench between us. Marissa looked at the timestamp. Her face went blank. He said the date on the county website was the filing date. It is the notarization date. Maybe Denise typed it wrong. I showed her the wrong middle name. May was grandma's, she whispered. Yes. For a moment I saw my daughter reach the edge of belief. Then she stepped back. You have lawyers. He has payroll due. Of course his paperwork isn't perfect. Forgery is not imperfect paperwork. You always do this. Do what? You hold everything behind your back and wait to see who disappoints you. Dad did it too. Secrets about money. Secrets about the company. Tests nobody knows they're taking. The accusation was not fair. It was not entirely false. What did you sign? I asked again. She stared across the playground. A declaration. Saying what? That you had become confused about finances and that I supported Preston managing the house and land temporarily. Temporarily has no legal meaning in a deed. He said the bank needed proof the family wouldn't contest it. The bank. She closed her eyes. There was the midpoint of our story, though neither of us knew to call it that. Marissa had not merely believed her husband. She had helped him present my property to a lender. Did you speak to Rivergate? A man called to verify. I told him you wanted Preston to handle things. Did you tell him you saw me sign? Her silence answered. I stood. Mom, I was trying to save our home. By giving him mine. We would have put it back. The plural cut cleanly. She reached for my sleeve. Preston said you had enough. He said the land was a tiny piece of what Dad left you, that refusing was about control. I could have ended the mystery then. I could have told her about Hargrove Meridian, my voting shares, the acquisitions committee, the plane waiting 20 minutes away. I could have turned myself from helpless mother into someone impressive enough to believe. But Rivergate had not yet preserved its call records. Cole and Ashford had not yet produced the file room index. If Marissa learned everything, Preston would learn it within the hour. He would know which records mattered and where I had strength. So I let my daughter think I was withholding the truth because I did not trust her. Perhaps that was also partly true. You cannot see Toby, she said when I would not answer. Not until you stop. I will not involve him. That's not what I said. I heard you. I left the photograph on the bench. Monday's hearing lasted 19 minutes. Preston's lawyer argued that I had voluntarily transferred the house as part of family estate planning and was now confused. Priya presented the limited power, the forged broad power, the hospital timestamp, and Denise's message. The judge did not decide ownership. She restored my immediate access, prohibited Cole residential assets from entering or altering the property, and ordered Preston to surrender all keys by 5 o'clock. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited for another case. One recognized the Cole name and asked Preston whether his company had stolen his mother-in-law's home. He kept walking. I did too. At Larkspur Lane, Deputy Ruiz watched a locksmith remove Preston's deadbolt. Inside, every drawer stood open. File folders covered the dining room floor. The blue ceramic bowl had been wrapped in newspaper and placed in a box labeled "Donate." Walter's photograph lay face down beneath it, the glass cracked across his smile. In the study, someone had taken my old desktop computer and the external backup drive. They had left the monitor. The police treated it as disputed property until I showed them the serial numbers and purchase receipt. Deputy Ruiz added theft to her report. I walked room to room photographing everything. In the kitchen, the small notebook where I tracked Preston's memory claims was missing. So were 2 address books and the folder containing the old mill survey. But in the trash beneath the sink, I found the torn corner of a FedEx envelope addressed to Preston Cole, care of Marlowe Capital Advisory, Jacksonville, Florida. Marlowe was not Rivergate. Priya searched its corporate filings. It was a private lender specializing in rescue financing at rates that made Rivergate look charitable. At 6:20, she found a financing statement filed that afternoon. Marlowe claimed a security interest in all rights, title, proceeds, and development entitlements associated with Old Mill Road Parcel 7B. Preston had pledged the land despite the court order, the title dispute, and the covenant. He had done it through an entity we had not yet restrained. The house had not merely been a test. It had been the first domino, and while we stood one back up, he had pushed the next. Marlowe wired Cole and Ashford $2 million before receiving the title report. Preston made payroll Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Rivergate learned about the second lender and froze every remaining line of credit. The company could no longer pay subcontractors. A concrete crew walked off the medical office project. 2 suppliers filed liens. Preston's cousin, who served as president but had allowed Preston to handle financing, called an emergency board meeting. Preston came to my house after dark. He stood outside the repaired door with no umbrella, soaked through and stripped of polish. I spoke through the storm door. "Leave. Just listen." "You sent someone into my room." "No. I swear to God, Nell. I searched your house. I changed the locks. I did not send anyone to the hotel." That is a narrow defense. He put both palms against the glass. Marlowe uses investigators. They knew the collateral was disputed. Maybe they were trying to find the covenant. You gave them enough information to know it existed. I told them there might be an old survey issue. You pledged land you do not own. Land Marissa will inherit. You built this entire crime in the future tense. His face twisted. Do you know what my father left me? A company with his name on every truck and debt behind every wall. He died and everybody looked at me to keep it alive. 214 people, Nell. Their insurance. Their mortgages. Marissa's house. Toby's doctors. I needed one asset the bank could understand. So you chose mine. You weren't using it. That is not a transfer instrument. You could have helped without feeling it. There it was, the belief beneath all the others. He knew I was not poor. He did not know how much I had, but he believed whatever remained hidden was morally available to him. You should have asked, I said. I did. At lunch. You said no because Walter proposed there. And you heard no as an invitation to improve your argument. He stepped closer. Help me unwind this. Tell Rivergate you intended the collateral. Give Marlowe a replacement parcel. I will restore the house tonight. The house is already being restored. Then do it for Marissa. You used her voice on a lender call. She made her own choice. Did she know you had already altered my signature page? He looked away. Did she know? No, the answer was so quiet I nearly missed it. Tell her. It would destroy us. That possibility existed when you did it. His expression hardened again. Shame had opened a door, fear slammed it shut. If Cole and Ashford fails, Marissa loses her home. Toby loses his school, his doctors, everything familiar. You can stop that with one phone call. And if I do? We settle. Everybody goes home. I am home. I closed the inner door. The next morning, Marissa filed a petition asking the probate court to appoint a temporary conservator over my individually held property. Attached was her declaration. It described missed appointments, repeated calls, stove incidents, suspicion, isolation, and my sudden fixation that Preston had forged documents. It asked that a neutral professional, not Preston, control my house and old mill until doctors could assess me. The petition did not give Preston the land. It did something nearly as useful. It told Rivergate and Marlowe that my challenge might be the product of incapacity. Marissa had signed it at 8:43 the night Preston stood on my porch. He had gone home and told her enough truth to make my silence look like illness. That was the moment I nearly lost her. It was also the moment I stopped protecting her from the full record. I did not call to plead. I asked Priya to serve Marissa with the documents our rules required, the forged power, Denise's message, the lender files, the title objections, the conservation covenant, and the photograph from Atlanta. Nothing more. No letter from me. No accusation. Then I scheduled my own cognitive evaluation with a neurologist unconnected to either family. I completed memory testing, financial capacity questions, blood work, and a brain scan. The report found normal age-related changes and no impairment affecting judgment or independence. Preston had expected me to refuse an examination so refusal could become evidence. I gave him a better examination than he wanted. The probate judge denied immediate control and appointed a guardian ad litem to investigate. It was not a victory. My private life was now a court file, and a stranger would interview my neighbors, doctors, and daughter. But my assets remained mine. Celia called that afternoon. Rivergate wants Hargrove Meridian in the workout group, she said. They need a participant with development capacity to finish the medical offices if Cole defaults. Terms? We would fund up to $4 million in completion costs. In exchange, we receive a senior participation in that project only and an option to buy the adjacent industrial tract at appraised value. No personal residences. No old mill. No blanket claim on Cole and Ashford. It was not revenge. It was a transaction our company might have made without my family anywhere near it. The medical project was sound. The industrial tract connected two properties we already owned. If structured correctly, the money would finish a building instead of disappearing into Preston's old holes. It would also give Rivergate a path to stabilize the useful part of Cole and Ashford without accepting fraudulent collateral. Take it to the independent directors, I said. Disclose my conflict. I will not vote. And if they approve? Proceed on value, not on my anger. The directors approved after 2 outside reviews. Hargrove Meridian did not buy Preston's personal debt, did not own his company, and did not threaten his home. It participated in one viable project and required Rivergate to release every reference to my property from its collateral schedule. That distinction mattered to me. Preston had treated ownership as permission to control people. I would not answer him in the same language. Rivergate scheduled a workout meeting for Friday. Preston, his cousin, Marlowe, the title insurer, Hargrove Meridian, and the principal guarantors would attend. Because my land had been pledged, Priya and I were invited. Before the meeting, Marissa came to Larkspur Lane alone. I let her in. She stood in the hallway staring at the cracked glass over Walter's photograph. Then she noticed the blue bowl on the table, glued together with a pail seam down one side. "Did he do this?" she asked. "Someone working for him packed it. He said you staged the damage after you got back in." I said nothing. She followed me into the kitchen and placed the served documents on the table. "Why didn't you show me these at the motel?" "Because you would have taken them to him." "You don't know that. You took the hospital photograph to him." Her face confirmed it. I asked him to explain. "And what did he say?" "That Denise made a mistake." "Do you believe him?" "I don't know what I believe." She walked to the stove and turned the front left knob. The igniter clicked without flame. "He told me you left this on twice. He stood there when it failed. He said he would order the part." She turned it off. "The school meeting?" I showed her the old email address in the message header. Then the call log proving Preston never phoned me. I showed her my notebook entries recovered from a cloud photograph I had taken months earlier. Each memory story had a date and a mundane explanation. Marissa sat down. "Why were you documenting us?" "Because Toby told me his father had invented a second phone call." "Toby knew?" "He noticed one contradiction. I told him to stay out of it." Her eyes filled. "He asked me if he caused this." "He did not." Preston said Toby misunderstood. Preston also said Toby noticed me repeating myself. He told the evaluator that. The room changed. Marissa took out her phone and scrolled through a family group chat. Months earlier, Preston had written, "Even Toby sees it now." He said Nell asked 3 times when surgery was, ****. Toby didn't know his surgery date until we told him, she said. That message was sent the day before. It was the child's small clue, not a secret recording or stolen file, that finally made the pattern visible to her. Preston had used Toby as proof before Toby possessed the fact he supposedly repeated. Marissa did not switch sides in my kitchen. Real life rarely turns on a single speech. She said she needed air. She walked through the garden, touched Walter's empty tomato cages, and cried where she thought I could not see her. When she came back, she asked one question. "What else haven't you told me?" So I told her. Not the value first. The work. I told her that I found our first machine shop lease when Walter was ready to quit. That I negotiated the purchase of a failed rail yard and turned it into warehouses. That lenders who would not look at me in 1989 learned to return my calls by 1995. That after Walter's death I kept voting control of Hargrove Meridian under my maiden name, Eleanor Voss. "How much?" she asked. The company owns a little under $200 million in property before debt. Its equity value changes. My trust controls 53% of the vote and a smaller economic share. She stared at me. It was substantial, but it was not a cash fortune waiting in a checking account, and it did not make me immune to loneliness, forgery, or a daughter who no longer trusted me. Preston thought Dad left it to managers. Most people do. I thought that. I allowed you to. Anger replaced shock. Why? At first, to keep you from feeling obligated. Later because secrecy became easier than deciding whom to trust. You let me think you couldn't afford a new roof. I said I didn't want to replace a roof insurance should cover. You let him build an entire story around you. Yes. And you watched me believe it. Until believing it became evidence he could use. She stood so quickly the chair struck the wall. You both made me live inside stories you wrote without me. Then she left. I did not chase her. For the next 24 hours, she answered neither my calls nor Preston's. She did something neither of us expected. She went to Cole and Ashford and asked to see the original family consent she had signed. Preston told her it was with the lawyers. Marissa had worked 6 summers in that office before Toby was born. She knew the file room clerk, knew where lender packages were indexed, and knew the security system logged every page scanned to an external address. She did not break in. She requested access as a guarantor whose declaration appeared in the package. When the clerk refused, she emailed Rivergate withdrawing her declaration and demanding a copy of everything submitted in her name. Rivergate sent it. Her 1-page statement had become 4 pages. The added pages said she had personally observed my worsening confusion, had witnessed me authorize both transfers, and believed I could no longer understand the nature of real property. Her signature page was genuine. The text above it was not. Preston had used the same method twice. That evening, Marissa found the paper originals in a Redwell folder Preston kept in the trunk of his car. She had gone there for Toby's overnight bag. On top lay my owner affidavit with the upper half cut away. Beneath it were her original 1-page declaration, an unrecorded deed for Old Mill, the omitted wetland report, and Denise's first notary journal photocopy. At the bottom was a draft email from Preston to Marlowe. Once the neutral conservator is appointed, title objections become manageable. My wife is prepared to confirm incapacity. Do not contact her directly until I say ****. Marissa photographed every page where it lay. Then she drove the folder, the car, and herself to Deputy Ruiz. The workout meeting began at 9 the next morning in Rivergate's Savannah conference room. The table was long enough to make adversaries look civilized. Preston sat beside his cousin Daniel Cole and 2 company lawyers. Across from them were Rivergate's special assets officers, Marlowe's counsel, the title insurer, Celia, and Hargrove Meridian's independent director. Priya and I sat at the end. Preston looked toward the door each time it opened. Marissa did not come in. He had not yet learned where she had spent the night. Rivergate's lead officer, a woman named Helen Ward, began without ceremony. The bank would not accept Larkspur Lane or Old Mill as collateral. It considered both transfers unauthorized and had referred the altered documents to its fraud department. The Hargrove Meridian participation offered a path to complete the medical office project, but only if Cole and Ashford replaced Preston as the officer responsible for financing and opened its books to independent oversight. Daniel Cole turned to Preston. You told us Nell agreed. She did agree. This is a family dispute that got weaponized when she panicked. Her limited power excludes conveyances, Helen said. She signed a second one. Priya placed the hospital photograph on the screen, followed by the forged instrument and Denise's message. Preston did not look at them. Marlowe's lawyer interrupted. His client had advanced $2 million in reliance on Preston's warranties. He demanded replacement collateral and a personal confession of judgment. Your client funded before title review, Priya said. After receiving written notice of the dispute. We received representations from Mr. Cole that Mrs. Hargrove lacked capacity to revoke authority. Representations supported by my daughter, Preston said. The door opened. Marissa entered with Samuel. She wore yesterday's clothes and carried no purse. Preston stood. Where's Toby? With Sarah. Sarah was Marissa's oldest friend. What is she doing here? He asked Samuel. Marissa answered. Correcting my representations. She sat beside me, though she did not touch me. Helen reminded everyone that the meeting was not a deposition. Marissa asked to speak anyway. She said the declaration submitted in her name contained 3 pages she had never seen. She had not witnessed me authorize a deed or a general power. Preston told her the house transfer was temporary, that I had agreed to help, and that the lender call was a formality needed to protect 200 jobs. Then Samuel distributed certified copies of the Redwell folder photographs, released through Marissa's counsel and authenticated against the originals she had surrendered to Deputy Ruiz. The original owner affidavit showed exactly where my signature page had been cut and reused. The original Marissa declaration showed the same method. The wetland report proved Preston knew his valuation was inflated. The draft email proved he planned to use a conservatorship not to protect me, but to quiet title objections. No one raised a voice. That made what followed worse for him. Daniel Cole asked the company lawyers to step into the hallway. 10 minutes later, the independent board members voted to suspend Preston from all authority pending investigation. His building credentials and system access were disabled before he left the room. Rivergate declared defaults based on false representations but agreed to a 30-day standstill if Cole and Ashford accepted the workout. Hargrove Meridian's money would be locked to construction invoices on the viable medical project. A court-appointed restructuring officer would decide which other projects could survive. Marlowe would pursue its claim against Preston and Cole residential assets, not against my land. Preston looked at me then. You bought my debt. It was the ending he had imagined for me, the underestimated widow revealing that she owned him. But it was not true. No, I said. My company invested in a building that deserves to be finished. Your debt still belongs to the people you borrowed from. Your company? Celia slid the conflict disclosure across the table. It identified me as chair of the acquisition committee and controlling trustee of 53% of Hargrove Meridian's voting interest. It also recorded my recusal. Preston read it twice. The shock on his face gave me no pleasure. That surprised me. You could have saved us at any point, he said. I could have given you money at many points. Those are not the same thing. My father built Cole and Ashford. And you confused preserving his name with preserving every decision made beneath it. He looked toward Marissa. You gave them the folder? I gave them what you did in my name. I did it for you. You never asked what I was willing to lose. Our house is a house. Toby needs parents who tell him the truth more than he needs that address. Preston's face collapsed for one unguarded second. Not because he had lost the company. Because Marissa had finally separated her future from his plan. He left with his lawyer. There was no arrest in the hallway. No handcuffs. No crowd applauded. Consequences in financial cases often arrive as calendars, invoices, cancelled passwords, and people who no longer return your calls. The title insurer accepted the forged deed claim that afternoon and joined our action to cancel it. Cole Residential Assets signed a consent order disclaiming the house. The county index was corrected first with a notice, then with a recorded order declaring the deed void from the beginning. My name never truly should have left title, the public record now said so. Marlowe released its filing against Old Mill after PREA showed that Cole Residential Assets had never acquired any interest to pledge. The lender reserved claims against Preston for fraud and breach of warranty. Rivergate referred the altered documents to federal investigators because they had been used in a bank transaction. The State Notary Commission opened a case against Denise. The prepaid number that sent the photograph of my bedroom was eventually traced to a recovery contractor Marlowe had hired to verify collateral. The contractor admitted locating my hotel and entering Larkspur Lane with a code supplied by Preston's financing broker, but denied trying to force my door. Marlowe fired the firm and settled my civil claim. Investigators could not prove who wrote the threat, and I learned to live without inventing certainty where the evidence stopped. Denise surrendered her commission and cooperated. She lost her job. Whether prosecutors would charge her was not mine to decide. Preston resigned from Cole and Ashford before the board could remove him permanently. He sold his shares as part of the restructuring and used most of the proceeds to settle guarantee claims. Marissa sold their house voluntarily rather than wait for a creditor to take it. The sale left her enough to rent a small place near Toby's school. The prosecutor eventually offered Preston a plea involving bank fraud and document forgery. He received probation conditioned on restitution, community service, and a prohibition against acting as a fiduciary or financial officer during the sentence. Some people thought that was too little. Some thought the destruction of his career and marriage was punishment enough. I learned not to confuse punishment with repair. They are different crafts. The probate petition ended when Marissa withdrew it and gave the guardian ad litem the altered declaration. The final report stated there had been no reasonable medical basis to question my capacity. That sentence occupied half a page. The story Preston built around me had taken months. I changed every lock again. This time, I watched the locksmith cut the keys. Marissa did not move in with me. I offered once, and she said no. I need to know I can build something without hiding inside your house, she said. I understood. For several months we spoke mostly about Toby. His surgery healed well. He returned to school, complained about physical therapy, and resumed dismantling radios in my garage. I never told him that his green line or his memory of the surgery date had helped us. He was a child, not a witness we owed a debriefing. One Saturday he found the blue bowl repaired on my hall table. You can still see the crack, he said. Yes. Are you going to paint over it? No, he nodded as if this were technically sound and went back to his radio. Marissa and I had our hardest conversation in July, 4 months after the first key failed. We walked Old Mill in the morning before the Georgia heat became unreasonable. The longleaf pines rose straight and spare above wiregrass. The green line on Walter's survey followed a shallow creek, crossed a sandy rise, and curved around the central stand. Preston says you destroyed him, she said. What do you say? I say he destroyed things and you refused to hide the damage. We walked farther. I helped him, she said. I lied to the bank. You repeated something you believed. Because it was easier to believe my husband than ask why my mother had become a stranger. I helped with the stranger part. She stopped beneath the 2 pines in Walter's photograph. Why didn't you trust me with the company? The old answer was that I wanted to protect her. It contained enough truth to be dangerous. Because after your father died, I became afraid that every relationship could be reduced to what I owned. Keeping quiet made me feel in control. Then I kept doing it after the danger existed only in my head. Preston's fraud isn't your fault. No, I need you to say that. Preston's fraud is Preston's fault. My secrecy did not forge a document, change a lock, or make him use your signature. But it left empty spaces in our family, and he knew how to fill them. She looked toward the creek. I said you shouldn't see Toby. You were frightened. I used him to make you obey. Yes. She flinched, perhaps expecting comfort. I forgive you, I said. That does not make it harmless. What happens now? We stop making love prove itself by surrendering boundaries. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took my hand. It was not a perfect reconciliation. Perfect reconciliations are another kind of forgery. We had counseling. We canceled dinners when conversations became cruel. She learned to ask direct questions about money. I learned to answer without deciding in advance which truths she could handle. I amended my estate plan too. Marissa would inherit security, but not a silent empire she had never chosen. Hargrove Meridian's voting control would pass through a stewardship trust with independent directors. Toby would have education and healthcare funds that no parent could pledge. I remained chair for 1 more year, then began transferring responsibility to Celia and the board in daylight, with everyone who mattered aware of what was happening. As for old Nell, I did something Preston never considered because it produced no quick collateral value. I donated a conservation easement over the central 6 acres to a local land trust and conveyed a narrow strip along the creek to the county for a public greenway. I kept the remaining 5 acres under family ownership with limited uses. The arrangement preserved the longleaf stand, opened a walking path, and allowed a small trailhead where an abandoned shed had stood. Cole and Ashford, under new management, completed the medical offices. Hargrove Meridian earned an ordinary return on its participation and bought the adjacent industrial tract at its independently appraised price. About 160 jobs survived the restructuring. Others did not. No story I could tell would make that painless. Preston wrote me once, a year later. The letter contained no threat and no request for money. He said he had begun working for a commercial contractor in a role that involved no financing. He said he still believed, some days, that one successful development would have fixed everything. On other days he understood that this belief had become permission to treat people as assets. I did not answer. Forgiveness, if it came, did not require access. The greenway opened on a cool morning in November. Toby, now 12, cut the ribbon with oversized county scissors. Marissa stood beside him. Samuel and Priya came, as did Celia and Deputy Ruiz. There were no reporters. Hargrove Meridian's name appeared on no sign. At the edge of the pine stand, the county installed a small wooden bench. Its plaque read, "For Walter Hargrove, who knew the value of shade. After everyone left, I stayed." The path curved along Walter's green line, not perfectly, nature and surveyors rarely agree, but close enough. Pine needles softened my footsteps. Beyond the creek, houses had begun rising on land that belonged to someone else. Hammers carried through the trees. I sat on the bench and took the old Polaroid from my coat pocket. 9-year-old Marissa smiled between the pines, her father's hand visible at the edge of the frame. For years I thought preserving the land meant refusing to let anything happen to it. I had treated stillness as loyalty. Preston saw only the opposite error. If something could be converted into money, leaving it alone seemed wasteful to him. Walter had understood what both of us missed. Land could change without being consumed. A family could survive without returning to what it had been. A home was not made safe by a name on a deed alone, though the name mattered. It was made safe by boundaries that meant what they said and by people willing to honor no even when yes would rescue them from the consequences of their own choices. I still live on Larkspur Lane. The repaired blue bowl sits beneath Walter's photograph. The front left burner has a new igniter. I grow too many tomatoes and still fail to can most of them. On Thursdays, I shelve children's books at the library, where nobody knows or cares how I vote at a corporate board meeting. There are 4 keys to my front door now. I carry one. Marissa has one. Samuel's office holds one in a sealed emergency envelope. The 4th belongs to Toby, though he is under strict instructions not to lose it inside another radio. The first time his key turned in the lock, he looked over his shoulder and asked, "This one works, right?" "Yes," I said. "This one works." Then he opened the door himself. Some things become valuable because we build on them. Others become valuable because, at last, we learn how to leave enough of them standing.